my dears, one of the most common questions I get asked is, my partner was just diagnosed with autism or a disability. How do I support them? And since Valentine's Day is coming up, a time when the narrative of love is never queer or disabled, and also for other reasons is very triggering for me, and therefore I try to bury myself in work during that time of the year. Today we are going to talk about how to be a good ally to your partner, to your friend, to your child, anybody else, if they have a disability and or are neurodivergent. Also, I know that technically neurodivergency is also a disability. I do consider it as such, but I usually say it separately to remind yourself that it also exists under the disability umbrella. Yeah. So now obviously being an ally is different for every kind of disability, but the general ideas between them are typically the same. Basically, the major idea of it all is to support and to seek to understand your partner or friend, kid, etc. I'm not going to keep repeating the list every single time. Just replace the word partner with whatever word you may need for your own personal situation. Now, first, you should know that firsthand developing a disability or getting a diagnosis or realizing your neurotype, any other thing like that, is just really traumatizing. Even an autism diagnosis, which for a lot of people is a big relief, you're finally understanding yourself, it is traumatizing because you are suddenly reliving your entire life through a different lens, questioning who you are and trying to adjust based on this new knowledge. For those of you who are queer, accepting an autism diagnosis is a lot like coming out to yourself feels, but it also feels exponentially bigger because it's not just the sexuality and like love and friendship section of your life, it's literally every single piece of who you are and who you have ever been in your entire existence. So it's a lot to take in one go. And then with disability, whether that's a diagnosis or just developing one, it's really freaking scary to be able to Google your life expectancy and have it be a lot shorter than the average. It's really freaking scary to know that your whole life now has to completely change. And it's really freaking scary to lose your ability to do things or to be in so much pain that won't end. And as somebody who's had chronic pain since I was like 9-ish, every time I get a flare-up, I still panic that that level of pain is my reality forever. And we may react to this trauma in many ways, whether that is not really speaking for a few days or just needing to snuggle 24/7 or sending continuous autism memes or running into your room to yell about a thing that we're excited about that we just found about our disability. And I know that it's really hard to see your partner change, whether that is accepting a new identity and becoming prideful about it, or most commonly at the beginning, really struggling mental health-wise. And I know that especially if they seem to be hurting, you really want to help them with that because that's your job as a partner and friend. But just listening and being there is really important. Also accepting that we are going to change and being okay with that. I know I personally lost a partner and a whole ton of friends when I got diagnosed with autism, and pretty much everybody else when my serious mobility issues began. Because all of a sudden I was embarrassing because I started to stim, or I wasn't fun anymore because I had to start going to bed early for my health. And I've also had several situations where I've met like a soulmate level best friend and we spent every moment together for the first couple days that we know each other, and then that makes me flare up because I'm not sleeping because I'm going to bed later, so then I have to start managing my schedule better and going to bed earlier, and so then they start hanging out with somebody else after I go to bed, and then they get closer to them, and then I kind of get pushed to the side. And you can say anything you want about that not being about disability, but it 100% is. And honestly, it is the most painful friendship loss to experience because that person has absolutely no idea and often thinks that you're being really weird and paranoid if you mention it, but it happens all the time. Also, a lot of people say, oh, I would never leave you if you were disabled or whatever, and they truly do believe that, but then when it happens, they get too overwhelmed and then they promptly cut you off. Believe me, I know. And I'm not saying that you're required to stay somebody's friend through this because I do personally believe that you should put your own mental and physical health first, and you should stop spending time with people who mess that up. But the second that you get uncomfy, stop and think about why that might be the case. Are they genuinely a toxic human in your life, or do you just have a lot of internalized ableism that you kind of need to deal with? And I will probably say this a million gazillion times, but whatever you're feeling is completely and totally normal. It's normal to be a little wary when your best friend changes a lot because, well, you befriended somebody who didn't have all of those traits that they are now gaining. And it's normal to really struggle to see your partner or your best friend or anybody else hurt. I mean, I once dated somebody who carried me home after I passed out in their room, not drunk, I am disabled. And then I forgot where I was and I completely panicked, and they handled it super calmly until I was falling asleep and I heard them crying. And I know that it's hard, and I know that it's scary, and it's okay to feel that way, and you are allowed to express those emotions, but I also need you to know how it feels to be on the other side of that. First of all, it's freaking terrifying to go through anything like that and to suddenly pass out and forget where you are. But also, I felt so incredibly guilty for putting my partner in that situation. I know it wasn't my fault, though I probably could have noticed the signs and probably done something a little bit earlier, but I didn't want to ruin our date night, so that was a thing. Sometimes having a disabled partner does look like that. Sometimes it's messy and it's scary and they need a lot of help, but because the idea of codependency is so frowned upon in our society, it makes dependent people feel like they're not allowed to be dependent. And that's where the idea of what I call the burden complex comes into play, which I have a serious one, I'm gonna be totally honest about it, because the media pushes this idea that the disabled person is somebody that you are only friends with for brownie points, and that you don't actually want to be friends with disabled people because they're too needy and they're embarrassing and they get in the way and all of that stuff. And because that is all we see, it's what happens in the real world too. And we all know it, disabled or not. And so a lot of disabled people get the burden complex, which is the feeling that we're too needy or we're too dependent or we don't deserve to take up space, that we're wasting your time, that we're stressing you out, that we are just plain in the way, that we're not giving equally into this relationship. And to any abled people thinking to themselves, nobody thinks you're a burden, nobody thinks that about you, I've been directly called a burden to my face a lot in my life. Like enough times in the last 6 months to make a piece about it for my theater final, which you can watch over here if you're interested. But what I first want to say for my disabled viewers, you are not a burden. Every single human has needs and is dependent on other people for those needs to be met. The thing is that society has told us that some needs are socially acceptable and some are not, and has conditioned us to believe that we are asking for too much when we're actually asking the same amount as everybody else is. So if your partner has to carry you up the stairs to bed sometimes, don't think that you're in the way. I mean, you help them talk through their struggles about the day and you did the dishes this morning. A relationship is kind of a 50-50 thing. You're each giving equally and they love you. This goes for friends too. They want to make sure that you're doing okay. They want to help you to get your meds and to make sure that you don't accidentally eat anything that you're allergic to when you're trying to get food in the dining hall. And turns out your friends actually get really sad when you tell them that you feel like you're a burden to them because they don't know how to prove to you that you aren't, and even though it feels very, very, very real in your head, they don't even think about it. I absolutely promise. And to my non-disabled/ally viewers, my heat is so loud right now. You are allowed to struggle and to have a hard time. You are allowed to cry about how hard it is when your partner just forgets who you are for a few hours. Just keep in mind whether that needs to be said to them or to a therapist, because believe me, it's about 30 times scarier for the person who's experiencing it, and we know that it's scary for you. We want to support you to be able to support us. But if we know that it's super, super hard on you, we will, by instinct, just stop telling you when things go wrong, which then makes things go so much more wrong more often than they ever would, because we don't nip symptoms in the bud because we're scared of scaring you. And I promise that over time that will get so much easier for you as you get used to it. I know the first time that I had a dislocation around my friends, everybody was like, oh my god, are you okay? And kind of just freaking out a little bit. And at this point it's just like, hey, need some duct tape, bro. And you know, everybody's just kind of gotten used to my disabilities at this point and we just continue on. And because of that, I don't get as scary sick as I used to. So know that you will both have a hard time early on as you work out a system, but it'll get easier as time goes on. Just hang in there, maybe don't vent your feelings about their disability to them. They're not going to feel too good about that. Another way that you can make this easier for yourself is to understand from the start. So that means researching their disabilities, learning how people like them tend to handle things, and trying to understand the experiences of them as well as other people with those disabilities. For example, I have a page on my website called I'm the Parent of an Autistic Kid. This also applies to every other possible relation to an autistic person you could possibly think of, and it breaks down all of the pieces of the autistic experience and puts them into action so that you can actually take from them and be a good ally to somebody with those experiences. I have yet to find anything else like that for any other disorders or anything else, but in theory maybe they exist. Maybe there are other better resources I haven't even found. And also just have conversations with us about it. I mean, if you come up with questions, ask them. When somebody I care about asks me about my disability and genuinely wants to learn, I feel like they actually care and they want to support me, and it just means so much. You can also hop into the disability community because you are always welcome here, and we can help to support and teach you as well. Obviously, disabled people do not exist to be your educators, but it's one thing for a random person to walk up to me and go, hey, I see that you have a sticker on your laptop that says that you're autistic and disabled. What do you think about atypical? As opposed to my best friend texting me and going, wait, I just saw a meme about how autism speaks is the worst. Can you explain, because I don't quite get it and I want to know. Also, I know that a lot of the how do I be a good ally to my disabled friends things are all about the big gestures and the big shows of acceptance. But in my experience, the people who just go, all right, this is our new normal, we're rolling with it, and just continue to vibe with me regardless of what just happened, are the best allies. And to clarify, that does not mean ignoring that they have a disability or pretending it doesn't exist, because it is a huge part of who we are and how we need to function in the everyday world, but you also don't need to get super weird and uncomfy about it. Match our tone. For example, when I dislocate something, I typically just giggle or do an over-dramatic sigh and then pop it back in place and move on. In fact, most of the disabled people that I know are totally cool with joking about their disabilities. You know, it just happens. Obviously, if you've never joked with somebody about what they look like or whatever before they start using a wheelchair, maybe don't start joking to them about using a wheelchair. When they start using it, that's just a no. But if you're used to joking around them, as long as they're also joking around about that thing, feel free to tease them about the fact that they're allergic to literally everything. It is so hilarious that I can only eat 3 things in the dining hall. That will almost always be hilarious to me. Sometimes I will sit on my bed and I'll cry about how much I genuinely miss chicken fingers, and in that case you can hold my hand and support me as I'm crying, but then after I've had a solid amount of time to cry about it, you can just be like, you realize you're sobbing about chicken fingers right now, and I will burst into giggles and everything will feel perfect again. In my opinion, laughter is how we get out of this life alive, and, well, we don't get out, never mind. And I think that we all need some more of it. I will never forget the time that I lost the ability to pick up things, but I needed somebody to open my migraine meds, and my friend got down on one knee and proposed to me with a handful of pills, and I laughed so hard I started sobbing, and it was very much what I needed in that moment because I felt like I was dying. I was in so much pain. Also, when it comes to accessibility, again, the little things matter so much more to us. For example, this Thanksgiving, my family made an allergen-friendly mashed potatoes for the first time since I've become incapable of eating literally anything, and so I was able to sit down and serve myself from the bowls on the table just like everybody else for the first time in like a year and a half. My sister also has a tendency to communicate with me through my special interests, so like once I got a random unmarked letter and I was like, what is this? And it was a laminated pamphlet she found about every single type of shark on this, in this hemisphere. This also includes having somebody schedule an event earlier in the evening so that I can go to bed on time, or somebody going up and asking if there's going to be strobe lights in a show that we're about to see together so that I don't have to take the initiative to do that, or as soon as somebody realizes that the things that they're talking bad about for other people as being like weird and cringy, once they learn that those are actually just autistic traits, they stop talking bad about people altogether because they're understanding now. Or seeing somebody close to me repost an autism thing on their Instagram story when I know that they wouldn't have done that before they knew me, or sitting in a space when we hang out so that eye contact doesn't feel as mandatory, or taking sign language classes to better communicate with me when I have a meltdown and lose the ability to speak, or people choosing to have sober and sensory-friendly events so that I can join without having too much anxiety, and also having somebody who knows that grocery shopping is really stressful for me and then making it a friend adventure where we giggle the whole time so it's not so scary anymore. Also, one of my friends and I used to do weekly friend dates because they wanted to make sure that we spent quality time together where I didn't feel like I had to stay up late because they were always up until like 2 in the morning. So instead we would go on an adventure during the day, and that would be our like designated time together. I also had somebody who knew that I would have a hard time recognizing them after their haircut because of my face blindness. So then they took pictures throughout the whole haircutting process, and then they made a little video at the end talking to me and showing me the new look after it was finished so that I could get used to it and get comfortable with their new haircut before I saw them again. And those tiny things, those little things that you wouldn't even think of until you're disabled in an everyday situation yourself, those are the things that make me feel like not only do you understand my outward presenting disability traits, but you also understand how I see the world and how the world can be most accessible for me. That's honestly how you win. Well, I'm not gonna say like you win any disabled person's heart because I don't want to generalize, but at least for me, that is how you win my heart, like hands down. So in conclusion, the best way to be an ally is to educate yourself, to work on your own ableism, to seek to understand the other person's experience. Don't make us feel like a burden because, well, we're not, and make things accessible for us, not just by, you know, avoiding stairs that you come past, but also by making all of the other little teeny tiny changes that make the moment to moment easiest for us. And treat us like you would treat any other human being. And I want to say that all of this is not that hard, but I do know that it is hard sometimes. I will admit that, and that's okay. As long as you're working on it, as long as you show that you're working on it and show that you care and that you want to try harder and do better, that's what matters the most. So, with that, I wish you a very Merry Valentine's Day, or for those of you like myself who have trauma and like to hide as much from this holiday as humanly possible, I hope that you have a nice self-care day. And yeah, as always, thank you for listening, thank you for learning. Remember, your story isn't over, it has only just begun, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.